The distant rumble of thunder echoed across the vast Wyoming Territory as Abigail Hayes stood on the weathered porch of her father's general store, watching the storm clouds gather on the horizon. It was 1876, and the promise of rain brought hope to a land parched by summer's relentless heat. She tucked a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear, her green eyes scanning the dusty main street of Promise Creek, the frontier town she'd called home for all of her 22 years. "Miss Hayes." The familiar voice made her turn, a smile already playing on her lips despite her determination to appear stern. Riding toward the store on his chestnut mare was Ryder Blackwood, his worn Stetson pulled low over his eyes, the dust of the trail still clinging to his leather vest and denim trousers. At 28, Ryder had earned his reputation as one of the finest horse trainers in the territory, a man who could tame even the wildest Mustang with patience and gentle hands. "Mr. Blackwood," Abigail acknowledged with a nod, crossing her arms. "You're late. Pa expected those supplies from Cheyenne 3 days ago." Ryder dismounted with fluid grace, his boots landing softly in the dirt. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "Got caught in a washout along the Eastern Pass. Had to take the long way around." His blue eyes danced with amusement. "Missed me, did you?" Abigail scoffed, though the flush in her cheeks betrayed her. "Hardly. Just tired of Pa's pacing and muttering about inventory." "Well, your wait is over." Ryder gestured to the loaded packhorse behind him. "Everything Thomas ordered, right down to those fancy hair ribbons from back east." Abigail's expression softened. "The blue ones, the very same." Ryder's smile was warm as the afternoon sun. "Thought they might match your Sunday dress." She stepped down from the porch, careful to maintain a proper distance. Ryder Blackwood had been delivering goods to her father's store for nearly 2 years now, and in that time, their exchanges had evolved from polite business transactions to something that made her heart beat a touch faster whenever he appeared on the horizon. "Let me help you unload," she offered, already reaching for one of the smaller parcels. "A lady like you shouldn't be hauling freight," Ryder protested, but his tone was light, knowing full well that Abigail Hayes was no stranger to hard work. "And a man like you should know better than to tell me what I can and cannot do," she retorted, hefting a crate with practiced ease. Together they unloaded the supplies, carrying them into the cool interior of Hayes' general store. Thomas Hayes, a stout man with graying hair and the same green eyes as his daughter, greeted Ryder with a firm handshake. "Beginning to think the Cheyenne River had swept you away, son," Thomas said, examining the bill of goods with a critical eye. "Nearly did, sir. Sorry for the delay." Ryder handed over a leather pouch. "Added a few extras to make up for it. Some candy sticks for the children and that special tobacco you favor." Thomas's expression softened. "Always the thoughtful one, aren't you? No wonder half the girls in town go starry-eyed when you ride through." Abigail busied herself arranging new stock on the shelves, pretending not to listen. "Only half," Ryder laughed, his gaze drifting to Abigail. "I must be losing my touch." "Or gaining some sense," Abigail quipped, though she couldn't quite keep the smile from her lips. As Thomas retreated to his office to record the new inventory, Ryder moved closer to Abigail, lowering his voice. "Town's having a social on Saturday night. Barn dance at the Wilsons' place." "I've heard," she replied, focusing intently on arranging a row of canned peaches. "Thought you might want some company walking over. Stars should be real pretty that night." Abigail turned to face him, their proximity sending a flutter through her chest. "Mr. Blackwood, are you asking to escort me to the dance?" "Been working up the courage for about 6 months now," he admitted with a sheepish grin. "What do you say, Miss Hayes? will you give a humble freight hauler the honor?" Their eyes met, and for a moment, Abigail felt as though the world had narrowed to just the two of them, standing amid sacks of flour and bolts of calico. "I suppose someone needs to make sure you don't step on too many toes," she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. Ryder's face lit up, and he took her hand, pressing a quick, chaste kiss to her knuckles before she could protest. "I'll be here at sundown on Saturday, wearing my finest and smelling considerably better than I do now." Abigail laughed despite herself. "See that you are, Mr. Blackwood. A lady has standards." The bell above the door jingled as a customer entered, breaking the moment. Ryder stepped back, replacing his hat with a flourish. "Until Saturday, Miss Hayes." As he departed, Abigail found herself watching his retreating figure longer than propriety dictated. Something had shifted between them, like the first warm breeze after a long winter, promising change and new beginnings. What she didn't know then was that this simple acceptance of a dance invitation would set in motion events that would test her heart, her courage, and everything she thought she knew about love in the unforgiving wilderness of the American frontier. Saturday arrived with surprising swiftness. Abigail stood before the small mirror in her bedroom, pinning the last of the blue ribbons into her carefully arranged hair. The matching dress, with its modest neckline and full skirt, had been a birthday gift from her father the previous year, saved for special occasions. "You look beautiful, Abby," Thomas said from the doorway, his voice thick with emotion. Since her mother's passing 5 years earlier, it had been just the two of them, building a life and a business in Promise Creek. "Thank you, Pa." She smoothed the fabric of her skirt, suddenly nervous. "It's just a dance." Thomas smiled knowingly. "Is it now? Because that's the 3rd time you've checked your reflection and you've never much cared for mirrors before." Abigail sighed. "Ryder's a good man." "That he is," Thomas agreed. "Just be careful with your heart, daughter. Men who roam the trails have horizons in their blood." Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the front door of their modest home behind the store. Abigail's pulse quickened as she gathered her shawl and kissed her father's cheek. "Don't wait up," she whispered. "Oh, I most certainly will," he countered with a wink. When Abigail opened the door, she nearly gasped. Ryder stood before her, transformed. Gone were the trail-worn clothes and the dust of travel. In their place was a crisp white shirt beneath a dark vest, clean trousers, and boots polished to a shine. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd clearly visited the barber for a trim. "Miss Hayes," he greeted, his voice betraying a hint of nervousness as he removed his hat. "You're a vision, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You clean up rather well yourself." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his sleeve. The summer evening was warm, the sky painted in spectacular hues of orange and pink as the sun began its descent. "Beautiful night," Ryder observed as they walked toward the Wilson farm on the outskirts of town. "Indeed." Abigail glanced up at him, noting how the fading light caught the angles of his face. "Have you been busy with deliveries this week?" "Some," he answered. "But I've been handling another matter too, been looking at a parcel of land along Cedar Creek." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "Land? Are you thinking of settling down, Mr. Blackwood? I thought you had horizons in your blood, as Pa likes to say." Ryder chuckled. "Man can change, Miss Hayes. Even a wanderer like me can start thinking about roots when the right reasons come along." The implication in his words sent a warmth spreading through Abigail's chest, but she dared not examine it too closely. Instead, she steered the conversation toward safer topics as they continued their walk. The Wilson barn had been transformed for the occasion. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over the gathering. A makeshift band of local musicians had assembled in one corner, their fiddles and harmonicas filling the air with lively tunes. Nearly the entire town had turned out, from the youngest children to the oldest elders. "May I have this dance?" Ryder asked as the band struck up a reel. Abigail nodded, allowing him to lead her into the cleared space at the center of the barn. His hand rested lightly at her waist, the other holding hers with gentle firmness. As they moved together, Abigail was surprised by his grace. "You're quite the dancer, Mr. Blackwood," she remarked as he guided her through a turn. "Had a grandmother who insisted all her grandsons learn. Said no woman would have us otherwise," he explained with a grin. "Seems she was right." The evening passed in a whirl of music and laughter. Abigail danced not only with Ryder but with several other young men from town, though her eyes always sought him out whenever they were apart. She noticed more than a few admiring glances from other young women, and felt an unexpected pang of possessiveness. During a break in the dancing, Ryder brought her a cup of punch, and they stepped outside to catch the evening breeze. Stars now blanketed the sky, a dazzling display of light against the velvet darkness. "Told you the stars would be pretty tonight," Ryder said softly, standing close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Abigail looked up both at the stars and at him. "You did, and you were right." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant music and laughter from inside the barn. "Abigail," Ryder began, using her given name for the first time, "I've been meaning to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made her turn to face him fully. "What is it?" He took a deep breath. "I've been riding these trails for a long time, seen a lot of places, met a lot of people, but nowhere ever felt like somewhere I should stay, not until Promise Creek, not until you." Abigail's heart began to race. "Ryder." "That land I mentioned," he continued, his voice gaining confidence. "It's good land, perfect for raising horses, building a home. I've put a down payment on it and I have plans drawn up for a house. A proper house with a porch where a person could sit and watch the sunset." He took her hands in his eyes reflecting the starlight. "What I'm trying to say, not very elegantly I'm afraid, is that I'd like to build that house for us. I'm asking you to marry me, Abigail Hayes." The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. Abigail stared at him, searching his face for any sign of jest or uncertainty. Finding none, she did the last thing either of them expected. She laughed. It wasn't a joyful laugh of acceptance, but a nervous, incredulous sound that escaped before she could stop it. Ryder's expression fell, his hands loosening around hers. "I'm sorry," she gasped, trying to compose herself. "It's just, we've never even properly courted. We've known each other for 2 years, but most of that time you've been on the trail, and now you're talking about marriage and a house and—" "It's so sudden." Ryder stepped back, his face carefully neutral now. "I understand. It was presumptuous of me." "No, that's not." Abigail reached for him, but he had already turned away, replacing his hat. "We should get back inside," he said, his voice polite but distant. "People will wonder where we've gone." The remainder of the evening passed in awkward interactions and stolen glances. When it came time to leave, Ryder escorted her home as promised, but the easy camaraderie of earlier had vanished, replaced by stilted conversation and painful silences. At her door, Abigail turned to him, desperate to mend what had broken. "Ryder, about earlier, no need to explain," he interrupted, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "It was a beautiful night and I got carried away. No harm done." "But I didn't mean—" "Good night, Miss Hayes," he said firmly, tipping his hat before turning to leave. Abigail watched him go, a hollow feeling settling in her chest. She had hurt him, and worse, she wasn't entirely sure why she had reacted as she did. Because the truth, which she was only beginning to acknowledge to herself, was that the idea of being Ryder Blackwood's wife filled her with a warmth and excitement she had never known before. But fear had gotten the better of her fear of the unknown, fear of giving her heart to a man whose life had been defined by movement and change. And now, she feared she had lost him before she ever truly had him. The following week passed with no sign of Ryder. Thomas noticed his daughter's distraction, but asked no questions, simply offering silent support as she moved through her days with uncharacteristic quietness. On the 8th day after the dance, the door to the general store opened and Abigail looked up from her ledger, hope flaring briefly before dying as she saw it was only Mrs. Wilson coming to purchase thread. "Good morning, Abigail," the older woman greeted. "Lovely day, isn't it?" "Indeed it is, Mrs. Wilson. How can I help you today?" As Abigail wrapped the spools of thread in brown paper, Mrs. Wilson chatted amiably about the success of the dance and various town gossip. "Oh, and did you hear about Mr. Blackwood?" she asked casually. Abigail's hand stilled. "No, what about him?" "He's been quite the busy bee, from what my herald tells me. Out at that new property of his from dawn till dusk, clearing land and starting the foundation for a house. Quite determined, apparently. Harold says he's never seen a man work with such. What was the word he used?" "Ah, yes, intensity." Abigail forced herself to continue wrapping the package. "I hadn't heard. That's good for him." Mrs. Wilson leaned in conspiratorially. "Between us, dear, half the young ladies in town are already planning how to catch his eye now that he's settling down. Josephine Miller's mother has invited him to Sunday dinner twice already." The thought of Ryder dining with the Miller family, with pretty, blonde Josephine smiling across the table at him, sent an unexpected pang through Abigail's chest. "Well, Mr. Blackwood is free to dine wherever he pleases," she said with forced lightness. "Will there be anything else today, Mrs. Wilson?" After the older woman departed, Abigail found herself unable to focus on her work. The image of Ryder building the home he had wanted to share with her plagued her thoughts. And the idea that other women were already setting their caps for him made her stomach churn with what she finally recognized as jealousy. That evening, after closing the store, Abigail made a decision. Changing into a simple riding skirt and blouse, she saddled her mare and set out toward Cedar Creek, where Mrs. Wilson had mentioned Ryder's property was located. The summer evening was pleasant, a light breeze carrying the scent of wildflowers as Abigail rode. She rehearsed what she might say to him, how she might explain her foolish reaction to his proposal, but no words seemed adequate. As she crested a small rise, she saw it, a clearing near the creek, where the skeletal beginnings of a structure were taking shape. And there was Ryder, swinging an axe with powerful strokes, cutting timber for what would become his home. Abigail hesitated, suddenly unsure of her welcome. But before she could retreat, Ryder looked up, his eyes finding hers across the distance. He lowered the axe slowly, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief. Taking a deep breath, Abigail urged her horse forward, stopping at the edge of the cleared area. She dismounted, tying the mare's reins to a young tree. "Hello, Mr. Blackwood," she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Miss Hayes," he acknowledged, his expression guarded. "This is a surprise." "I heard you were building," she said, gesturing to the foundation and frame rising from the earth. "I wanted to see for myself." Ryder nodded, setting the axe aside and moving closer. "It's not much yet, but it will be. Come fall, I'll have the main structure finished. By winter, it'll be a proper home." "It has a good view," Abigail observed, looking past the construction to where the land sloped gently down to the creek, beyond which the mountains rose majestically against the sky. "That it does." Ryder's voice softened slightly. "What brings you out here, Miss Hayes? Surely not just curiosity about my building skills." Abigail turned to face him fully, gathering her courage. "I came to apologize for laughing. It was unkind and it wasn't at all what I meant to do." Ryder's expression remained carefully neutral. "No need to apologize. You were honest in your reaction, and I respect that." "No, you don't understand," Abigail pressed on, taking a step closer. "I wasn't laughing at you or at the idea of being your wife. I was laughing because it seemed so sudden, so unexpected. I was surprised and nervous, and I didn't know how to respond." "And now," Ryder asked quietly, "have you had time to consider a more measured response?" Abigail's heart hammered in her chest. "I have, and I've realized that I was afraid. Afraid of how much I've come to care for you. Afraid of what it would mean to build a life with someone who's known so much freedom and adventure." Ryder's eyes softened, and he closed the distance between them, stopping just short of touching her. "Abigail, I chose this land, this place, because of you. The freedom of the trail doesn't compare to the freedom I feel when I'm with you. That might not make sense to most, but it's the truth." "It makes sense to me," she whispered, her eyes filling with unexpected tears. "And I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I didn't just tell you that I needed time, instead of laughing like some silly schoolgirl." Ryder reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. "I should have courted you properly, given you flowers and taken you on Sunday walks. My grandmother would be appalled at my lack of manners." A smile tugged at Abigail's lips. "Perhaps we could start now. The courting, I mean." "I'd like that," Ryder agreed, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Though I should warn you, Miss Hayes, my intentions remain the same. I still plan to ask for your hand again when the time is right. And I plan to give you a much better answer," she promised. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the half-built home, Ryder showed Abigail his plans where the kitchen would be, the parlor with its large windows to catch the morning light, the bedrooms upstairs for children someday. His voice grew animated as he described his vision, and Abigail found herself swept up in it, imagining a future that suddenly seemed not just possible but desirable. When it was time for her to return home, Ryder insisted on accompanying her, unwilling to let her ride alone as darkness fell. They traveled side by side, their conversation flowing easily once more, the awkwardness of the past week forgotten. At the edge of town, Ryder reached across to take her hand, bringing her mare to a halt alongside his horse. "Abigail," he said, his voice serious, "I meant every word I said that night. About wanting to build a life with you, about how I feel. I need you to know that." The sincerity in his eyes made her breath catch. "I know," she replied softly, "and I'm beginning to think I feel the same way." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face and made her heart skip a beat. "That's enough for now. The rest will come in time." As they continued toward her home, Abigail felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in days. She had made a mistake, but it wasn't irreparable. And perhaps, she thought with growing certainty, that mistake had been necessary, a stumble on the path to understanding her own heart. In the weeks that followed, Ryder Blackwood courted Abigail Hayes with a thoroughness that set the town's tongues wagging. He brought her wildflowers gathered from the prairie, walked with her after church on Sundays, and invited her to picnic at his property, where the house continued to take shape under his skilled hands. Thomas Hayes observed the courtship with quiet approval, noting the change in his daughter. She hummed as she worked, and her smile came more readily than it had in years. "He's a good man, your Ryder," Thomas remarked one evening as they closed the store. "Works hard, treats you well." "He's not my Ryder, Pa," Abigail protested, though her blush betrayed her. "Not yet, perhaps," Thomas conceded with a knowing smile. but I suspect it's only a matter of time." August turned to September, and the first hints of autumn touched the landscape. The house by Cedar Creek now stood complete in its outer structure, with windows installed and a proper door that Ryder had crafted himself. Inside, the rooms were taking shape, though much work remained before it would be truly habitable. On a particularly fine Saturday, Ryder invited Abigail to ride with him to a spot he had discovered, promising a view worth the journey. They packed a simple lunch and set out mid-morning, riding beyond his property and into the foothills that led toward the mountains. After an hour's ride, they reached a high meadow carpeted with late-blooming wildflowers. Below them stretched the valley, with Promise Creek visible as a cluster of buildings in the distance, and beyond that, the vast expanse of the Wyoming Territory extending to the horizon. "It's breathtaking," Abigail gasped, dismounting to better appreciate the vista. Ryder spread a blanket on a patch of grass, setting out their lunch of bread, cheese, and apple preserves that Abigail had made herself. They ate companionably, discussing his progress on the house and her latest shipment of books for the store's small lending library. When they had finished eating, Ryder reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern of leaves and vines. "I made this for you," he said, handing it to her with an almost shy expression. Abigail took the box, running her fingers over the delicate carving. "It's beautiful, Ryder, thank you." "Open it," he urged gently. Inside, nestled on a bed of soft fabric, lay a silver ring set with a small but perfect sapphire that matched the blue of her favorite ribbons. Abigail's breath caught as she lifted her gaze to his face. "Ryder." He took her hands in his, the box cradled between them. "Abigail Hayes, these past weeks have been the happiest of my life. Getting to know you better, sharing my dreams with you, seeing you smile. It's made me more certain than ever that what I want, more than anything in this world, is to build a life with you." He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm asking properly this time, with no rush and no assumptions. Will you marry me, Abigail? Will you make a home with me, raise a family with me, grow old with me?" Tears welled in Abigail's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, Ryder Blackwood, I will marry you." His face lit up with such happiness that it nearly broke her heart. He took the ring from its box and slipped it onto her finger where it fit perfectly. "I meant every word," he said softly, echoing his statement from weeks before. This time, Abigail didn't laugh. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his in their first kiss, gentle, sweet, and full of promise. "I know you did," she replied when they parted, "and so did I." As they sat together on the blanket, looking out over the land that would be their home, Abigail reflected on how differently things might have turned out had she not found the courage to seek Ryder out that day, to apologize and open her heart to the possibility of a future with him. "What are you thinking about?" Ryder asked, his arm around her shoulders. "How fortunate I am," she answered honestly. "To have found someone who would build a house for a woman who laughed at his proposal." Ryder chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Well, I'm a stubborn man. And I knew, even then, that you were worth waiting for." As the afternoon light began to fade, they packed up their picnic and mounted their horses for the ride back. The sapphire on Abigail's finger caught the sunlight, sending blue sparkles dancing across her hand, a constant reminder of the promise they had made to each other. High above the valley they called home. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Promise Creek. Thomas Hayes was the first to offer his blessing, embracing Ryder like the son he'd never had and kissing Abigail's cheek with tears in his eyes. "Your mother would have been so happy," he told her. "She always said you'd find a man worthy of your spirit." preparations for the wedding began in earnest. Abigail and her friends worked on her dress, a creation of ivory satin with lace that had been carefully stored away by her mother for this very purpose. Ryder accelerated his work on the house, determined to have it ready for them to move in after the ceremony. They set the date for late October, when the autumn colors would be at their peak and the harvest completed. The entire town was invited to celebrate at the church, with a reception to follow at the Wilson farm once again. As the wedding day approached, an unexpected challenge arose. A telegram arrived for Ryder from his former employer in Cheyenne, urgently requesting his services for one final delivery, a valuable shipment that needed to be transported to Denver and back, a journey that would take at least 2 weeks. "I can refuse," Ryder told Abigail as they sat on the porch of her father's house. The wedding is more important, but Abigail could see the conflict in his eyes. The payment offered was substantial, enough to purchase the remaining furnishings for their home and still have money set aside for the future. "Take the job," she said decisively. "We can delay the wedding by 2 weeks. Everything will keep, and you'll be back with a nest egg to start our married life." "Are you certain?" Ryder searched her face. "I don't want to disappoint you." Abigail squeezed his hand. "I'm certain. Our life together is just beginning. 2 weeks is nothing compared to the years ahead of us." And so it was decided. Ryder would leave the next morning for Cheyenne, complete the delivery to Denver, and return in time for their rescheduled wedding in mid-November. The town was notified of the change, and though there were some good-natured grumblings about having to wait longer for the celebration, everyone understood the practical necessity. The morning of Ryder's departure dawned clear and cool. Abigail rose early to see him off, bringing a package of food for his journey and a small token, a handkerchief she had embroidered with his initials. "For luck," she said, pressing it into his hand. "Come back to me safely." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he promised, drawing her into a tender embrace. "I'll be thinking of you every mile." With a final kiss, he mounted his horse and rode out of Promise Creek, turning once to wave before disappearing around the bend in the road. The days that followed were filled with activity, as Abigail continued preparations for the wedding and helped her father in the store. She visited Ryder's house, their future home, every few days, adding small touches. Curtains she had sewn for the windows, a quilt for their bed, herbs planted in a small garden near the kitchen door. A week after Ryder's departure, Thomas closed the store early, complaining of fatigue. By evening he was feverish, his breathing labored. Abigail sent for Dr. Wilson, who diagnosed pneumonia and prescribed rest, steam treatments, and a foul-smelling poultice that seemed to bring little relief. For 3 days and nights, Abigail barely left her father's side, applying cool cloths to his forehead when the fever raged and helping him sip broth when he was lucid enough to swallow. The women of the town took turns bringing meals and sitting with her, offering what comfort they could. On the 4th night, as a storm rattled the windows of their small home, Thomas Hayes took his daughter's hand. "Abby," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the wind, "you've been the light of my life, girl. So like your mother, strong, kind, beautiful." "Save your strength, Pa," Abigail urged, tears streaming down her face. "You need to get well. The wedding—" "Listen to me," he interrupted with surprising firmness. "I may not be there to walk you down the aisle, but I want you to know how proud I am, how happy I am that you found Ryder. He'll take care of you and you'll take care of him." "Pa, please," Abigail sobbed, clutching his hand tighter. "Don't talk like that. You're going to be fine." Thomas smiled weakly. "Promise me you'll be happy, Abby. Promise you won't let grief dim that beautiful spirit of yours." "I promise," she whispered, though her heart was breaking. As the storm reached its peak outside, Thomas Hayes drew his last breath, his hand growing slack in his daughter's grasp. Abigail sat motionless beside him, unable to comprehend that he was truly gone. It was Mrs. Wilson who found her there at dawn, still holding her father's hand, her tears long since dried on her cheeks. The older woman gently led Abigail away, helping her change out of her soiled dress and bringing her tea laced with brandy to calm her shattered nerves. The town rallied around her in her grief. The men built a coffin of polished pine, and the women prepared Thomas's body for burial, dressing him in his Sunday best. The funeral was held 2 days later, with nearly every resident of Promise Creek in attendance to pay respects to the man who had supplied their needs and extended credit during hard times without complaint. Abigail stood at the graveside, numb with shock and exhaustion. She had sent a telegram to Cheyenne, hoping to reach Ryder, but had received no response. He was likely already on the trail to Denver, unaware of the tragedy that had befallen his bride-to-be in the days that followed. Abigail moved through her grief like a sleepwalker. She opened the store because she knew her father would have wanted it, mechanically serving customers and taking inventory. At night, she returned to the empty house, where every corner held memories of the man who had raised her single-handedly after her mother's death. A week after the funeral, as Abigail was closing the store for the evening, she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching at a gallop. Looking up, she saw a rider silhouetted against the setting sun, pushing his horse hard. Her heart leaped with recognition even before he came fully into view. Ryder! He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, rushing to her with fear etched on his face. "Abigail, I just got the news in Denver. I came as fast as I could." She fell into his arms, the grief she had been holding at bay finally breaking free in great, heaving sobs. Ryder held her tightly, murmuring words of comfort as he stroked her hair. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "So sorry I wasn't here for you." When Abigail's tears finally subsided, Ryder led her to the porch steps and sat beside her, keeping his arm around her shoulders as if afraid she might shatter if he let go. "How did you find out?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. "A man from Promise Creek was in Denver on business. He recognized me from your description and told me about Thomas." Ryder's voice was heavy with regret. "I left immediately, rode day and night to get back to you. You abandoned the delivery." Abigail looked up at him in surprise. "Of course I did," Ryder said firmly. "Nothing is more important than you, Abigail. Nothing." Fresh tears filled her eyes, but these were different tears of gratitude for the man beside her, who had ridden for days without rest to be at her side in her darkest hour. "The wedding," she began hesitantly. "We should postpone it further. It wouldn't be right to celebrate so soon after." Ryder nodded, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Whatever you need, we have all the time in the world." In the weeks that followed, Ryder became Abigail's rock. He helped her in the store, handled the business correspondence she had neglected in her grief, and made arrangements for the storage of Thomas's personal belongings, until she was ready to sort through them. Most importantly, he was there each evening when the store closed, sometimes with a simple meal he had prepared, other times just with his steady presence and patient understanding. He never pushed her to talk about her father, but listened attentively when she chose to share memories. Gradually, Abigail began to emerge from the fog of her grief. She found comfort in the routine of the store and in Ryder's unwavering support. The wedding remained postponed indefinitely, but their commitment to each other only deepened through the shared experience of loss. As winter settled over Promise Creek, bringing shorter days and long, cold nights, Abigail made a decision. One evening, as she and Ryder sat before the fire in her father's, now her home, She turned to him with resolve in her eyes. "I want to get married," she said simply. "Before Christmas." Ryder looked at her searchingly. "Are you certain? There's no rush, Abigail. I'll wait as long as you need." "I'm certain," she affirmed. "Pa made me promise to be happy and being your wife. That would make me happy, Ryder. I don't want to wait any more." The joy that spread across his face warmed her more than the fire. "Then Christmas it is," he agreed, gathering her into his arms. "A small ceremony, perhaps, just us and a few close friends." Abigail nodded against his chest. "Perfect. And afterward we'll go home, to our home." 2 weeks before Christmas, on a clear, cold day when the snow lay pristine across the landscape, Abigail Hayes became Abigail Blackwood in a simple ceremony at the church in Promise Creek. She wore her mother's wedding dress, altered slightly to fit her taller frame, with a wreath of evergreen in her hair instead of the traditional veil. Ryder waited for her at the altar, his eyes filling with tears as she walked down the aisle alone, carrying a small bouquet of winter berries and pine. The minister spoke the traditional words, but added a special acknowledgement of Thomas Hayes, whose absence was keenly felt by all present. When it came time for the exchange of vows, Ryder took both of Abigail's hands in his voice strong and clear as he pledged his love and fidelity. Abigail's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the sacred promises, but her eyes never left his, drawing strength from the love she saw reflected there. After the ceremony, a small reception was held at the home of Dr. and Mrs. Wilson. There was cake and punch, music and dancing, but it was a subdued celebration, respectful of Abigail's recent loss while still honoring the joy of the occasion. As evening fell, Ryder helped his bride into their wagon, which he had decorated with pine boughs and ribbons. Wrapped in blankets against the winter chill, they drove through town toward Cedar Creek and the house that awaited them their home. Ryder had worked tirelessly in the weeks since his return to complete the interior. The parlor was furnished with a comfortable settee and chairs, the kitchen equipped with a sturdy table and a new cook stove. Upstairs, the bedroom held a large 4-poster bed with the quilt Abigail had made spread across it. But it was what awaited them in the parlor that brought fresh tears to Abigail's eyes. In the corner stood a small Christmas tree, decorated with simple ornaments and candles, and beneath it, a framed portrait of Thomas Hayes that Ryder had commissioned from a traveling artist who had passed through town earlier in the year. "I wanted him to be here with us," Ryder explained softly as Abigail knelt before the portrait, tracing her father's familiar features with trembling fingers. "In some small way." "It's perfect," she whispered, rising to embrace her husband. "Thank you for understanding how much I miss him, while still helping me move forward." That night, as they lay together in their new home for the first time, Abigail felt a sense of peace she hadn't known since before her father's illness. The grief was still there, a dull ache in her heart that she suspected would never fully disappear. But alongside it now was hope for the future she and Ryder would build together. "What are you thinking?" Ryder asked, his voice soft in the darkness as he held her close. "I'm thinking about that day in the meadow," she replied, her head resting on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. "When you proposed again, and I said yes instead of laughing." Ryder chuckled, the sound rumbling beneath her ear. "I'll never forget the look on your face when you opened that box, like you couldn't quite believe it was real." "I couldn't," Abigail admitted. "I still can't sometimes. That someone like you would want someone like me." Ryder shifted, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at her. In the faint moonlight filtering through the window, his eyes were serious. "Abigail Blackwood, you are the strongest, most beautiful woman I've ever known. I'm the fortunate one in this marriage, and don't you forget it." She reached up to touch his face, her heart full. "I love you, Ryder. So much. And I love you," he replied, bending to kiss her softly. "Always." As winter gave way to spring, Abigail and Ryder settled into the rhythms of married life. They worked side by side at the general store during the day, expanding the inventory to include more of the specialty items that Ryder had once delivered. In the evenings, they returned to their home by Cedar Creek, where they shared meals, talked about their day, and planned for their future. Ryder began breaking and training horses on their property, his natural gift with the animals quickly earning him a reputation that brought customers from as far away as Cheyenne. Abigail planted a larger garden, experimenting with vegetables and herbs that had never been grown in Promise Creek before. By summer, there was news to celebrate. Abigail was expecting their first child. The announcement was met with joy throughout the town, where the young couple had become beloved fixtures of the community. "A baby," Ryder marveled one evening as they sat on the porch he had built, watching the sunset over the creek. His hand rested gently on Abigail's still flat stomach. "Our baby. Pa would have been so excited," Abigail said softly, a hint of sadness in her voice despite her happiness. "He always wanted grandchildren." Ryder squeezed her hand. "He knows, love. Wherever he is, he knows." As Abigail's pregnancy progressed, Ryder's protectiveness increased proportionally. He insisted on hiring a young woman from town to help in the store so Abigail could rest more, and he rearranged their bedroom to accommodate a cradle. He was crafting himself a masterpiece of smooth wood and intricate carving that would be passed down through generations. In late January, during a fierce snowstorm that isolated Promise Creek for 3 days, Abigail went into labor. With the doctor unable to reach them, it was Mrs. Wilson, experienced from delivering 7 children of her own and countless others in the community, who helped bring Ryder Blackwood into the world. "He has your eyes," Abigail whispered exhaustedly as she cradled their son for the first time. "And your stubbornness." Refusing to wait for the storm to pass, Ryder laughed through his tears, overwhelmed by the tiny perfection of his son. "But your spirit, clearly, already making his own way in the world." As winter once again gave way to spring, the Blackwood family thrived. Riley grew stronger each day, his curious eyes taking in the world around him. Abigail recovered from the birth and returned to helping in the store, though now with Riley often nestled in a sling across her chest or napping in a basket behind the counter. On a particularly fine April morning, Ryder suggested a family picnic. He packed a basket with bread, cheese, and early spring strawberries, and they rode together on his horse to the high meadow where he had proposed to Abigail nearly 2 years earlier. The wildflowers were just beginning to bloom, painting the meadow with patches of color. Ryder spread a blanket on the grass, and they sat together, Riley cooing happily as he reached for the bright blooms his father held out to him. "You remember the first time I brought you here?" Ryder asked, his arm around Abigail's shoulders. "Of course," she replied with a smile. "You gave me that beautiful box with the ring inside." Ryder reached into his pocket and withdrew a familiar object, the wooden box he had carved for her, its pattern of leaves and vines as intricate as ever. "I thought you might like to see what else it holds," he said, placing it in her hands. Curious, Abigail opened the box. Inside, where the ring had once nestled, was a folded piece of paper. She removed it carefully, unfolding it to find a letter written in Ryder's neat hand. "Read it aloud," he urged gently. Abigail cleared her throat and began to read. "My dearest Abigail, as I watch you with our son, I am reminded daily of how fortunate I am that you said yes to sharing your life with me. Though our path has not always been smooth, from your laughter at my first proposal to the grief we shared at your father's passing, each step has brought us closer together, stronger in our love. I want you to know that I meant every word I said that night at the dance, and every word since. I will love you until my last breath, and even beyond. You and Riley are my world, my reason for being. I once thought freedom meant the open trail and endless horizons. Now I know true freedom is found in your arms, in our home, in the family we are building together. Forever yours, Ryder. Tears filled Abigail's eyes as she finished reading. She looked up to find Ryder watching her intently, love written plainly on his face. You once laughed at my proposal, he said softly, taking her hand. And later you cried when I told you I meant every word. I wanted to put those words on paper for you so you would always have them, always know the depth of my feeling for you. Oh, Ryder, Abigail whispered, cradling their son with one arm while reaching for her husband with the other. I don't deserve you. We deserve each other, he corrected, drawing her close, and all the happiness we can find in this life. As they sat together on the blanket, their son gurgling contentedly between them, Abigail reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From their first meeting at her father's store to the life they now shared, every step, even the missteps, had been necessary to create the love they now enjoyed. The laughter that had once wounded Ryder's pride was now a cherished memory, a reminder of how far they had come. And the tears she had shed, both of sorrow and joy, had watered the roots of a love that grew stronger with each passing day. Looking out over the valley below, with Promise Creek visible in the distance and their home by Cedar Creek nestled among the trees, Abigail felt a profound sense of gratitude. For Ryder, for Riley, for the life they shared, a life built on honest words and true feelings, on promises made and kept. I love you, she said simply, turning to her husband with a smile that contained all the happiness of their past and all the promise of their future. And I love you, Ryder replied, his eyes reflecting the same joy, always and forever. As the spring breeze carried the scent of wildflowers across the meadow, the Blackwood family, father, mother, and son, sat together in perfect contentment, surrounded by the beauty of the Wyoming wilderness, and the even greater beauty of a love that had found its way through laughter and tears to a happiness beyond words. 5 years later, the Blackwood home had expanded to accommodate their growing family. Riley, now a sturdy 5-year-old with his father's dark hair and his mother's quick wit, had been joined by 3-year-old Emma Grace, whose golden curls and sunny disposition brought joy to everyone she met. And now, nestled in a cradle in the corner of the parlor, 2-month-old twins Sarah and Samuel completed their family circle. Promise Creek had grown as well. What had once been a small frontier settlement was now a thriving town with a schoolhouse, a proper doctor's office, and even a small hotel to accommodate travelers on the increasingly busy road to Cheyenne. The general store, now officially Blackwood and Sons General Mercantile, had expanded into the adjacent building. Ryder handled most of the day-to-day operations, while Abigail managed the books and special orders when she wasn't busy with their children. Their home by Cedar Creek had become a gathering place for friends and neighbors. The original structure had been expanded to include a larger kitchen and additional bedrooms, and Ryder had built a spacious barn where he continued his horse training business. Life was full and rich, though not without its challenges. The harsh Wyoming winters sometimes tested their resilience, and the demands of business and family occasionally left them exhausted. But through it all, their love remained a constant, a foundation as solid as the house Ryder had built with his own hands. On a golden autumn afternoon, as the children played in the yard under the watchful eye of Mrs. Wilson's daughter Lucy, who helped with childcare, Ryder found Abigail sitting on the porch swing, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the slight chill in the air. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Blackwood," he said, settling beside her and taking her hand in his. Abigail smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I was just thinking about how different my life is from what I imagined as a girl. I thought I'd always be Thomas Hayes's daughter, helping in the store, maybe eventually taking it over completely." "Do you ever regret the path you chose instead?" Ryder asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Not for a moment," Abigail replied without hesitation, "though I do wish Pa could have seen his grandchildren. Especially Riley, he's so much like him sometimes, with that serious expression when he's figuring something out." Ryder nodded, watching as their eldest son carefully constructed a fort of sticks and leaves for his sister's dolls. "He has your father's integrity, that's for certain. And his generosity." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the swing moving gently beneath them. From inside the house came the faint sound of one of the twins beginning to stir. "I'll go," Ryder said, rising from the swing. "You rest a bit longer." Abigail caught his hand before he could step away. "Do you remember what today is?" Ryder's brow furrowed briefly before understanding dawned in his eyes. 7 years since the dance, since my first proposal. "And my foolish laughter," Abigail added with a wry smile. Ryder leaned down, cupping her face in his hands. "Not foolish, just honest, and look where it led us." As he disappeared into the house to tend to their child, Abigail remained on the porch, her gaze taking in the life they had built together, the home, the children, the love that had grown deeper and richer with each passing year. She remembered the young woman she had been, frightened by the intensity of her feelings for the handsome freight hauler who had swept into her orderly existence. How strange it seemed now that she had ever doubted, ever hesitated to embrace the future he offered. When Ryder returned with baby Samuel cradled against his chest, the infant's eyes heavy with sleep despite his earlier fussing, Abigail felt her heart swell with a love so profound it almost hurt. "I have something for you," Ryder said, settling beside her once more. From his pocket, he withdrew yet another small wooden box, this one carved with intertwining hearts. "Happy anniversary, my love." Inside the box lay a delicate gold locket. When Abigail opened it, she found a tiny portrait of their 4 children on one side and on the other, a miniature version of their wedding photograph. "Ryder, it's beautiful," she gasped, immediately putting it around her neck. "But I didn't get you anything." With the twins, I completely lost track of the date. "You've given me everything I could ever want," he replied, gesturing toward their children playing in the yard and the baby sleeping in his arms. "A family, a home, your love. What more could a man ask for?" As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Riley and Emma came running to the porch, eager to show their parents the treasures they had discovered: pretty stones from the creek, a particularly interesting leaf, a feather dropped by a passing bird. Abigail and Ryder listened attentively to their excited chatter, offering appropriate admiration for each find. When Lucy called the children in for supper, Ryder handed the sleeping Samuel to Abigail and scooped Emma into his arms while Riley raced ahead, always eager to be first. In the warm kitchen, with its savory smells and cheerful clutter of family life, Abigail looked around the table at the faces she loved most in the world. There was Riley, solemn as he said grace just as his grandfather had taught him. Emma, her golden curls catching the lamplight as she wiggled impatiently. The twins, now both awake and cooing in their cradles, and Ryder, her husband, her partner, her heart. "What are you smiling about, Mama?" Riley asked, noticing her expression. "I'm smiling because I'm happy," Abigail answered simply. "Because I have everything I could ever want right here at this table." Ryder's eyes met hers across the dishes and children, filled with the same contentment, the same gratitude for the life they shared. Later that night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Abigail and Ryder stood on the porch once more, looking up at the star-filled sky. His arms encircled her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't come looking for you that day?" Abigail asked softly. "After I laughed at your proposal," Ryder was quiet for a moment, considering. "I like to think we would have found our way to each other eventually. Some things are just meant to be." Abigail turned in his arms to face him. "I'm glad I didn't have to find out. I'm glad I had the courage to admit I was wrong. And I'm glad I had the stubbornness to keep building this house even when I thought you might never share it with me," Ryder replied with a grin. "Seems we're well matched in our determination." "In that and so much more," Abigail agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. As they stood together under the vast Wyoming sky, the house they had built warm and full of life behind them, Abigail remembered the words Ryder had spoken on that fateful night years ago. "I meant every word." How true those words had proven to be. Every promise kept, every dream shared, every day lived with the same devotion he had offered her from the beginning. And as she had done countless times in the years since, Abigail silently thanked whatever fate or providence had brought Ryder Blackwood into her life, the man who had taught her that true love wasn't found in grand gestures or perfect moments, but in steadfast hearts and honest words, in shared joys and sorrows, in a life built together one day at a time. A life that had begun, improbably enough, with laughter at a proposal and tears at the realization of just how deeply she was loved. A life that continued now, rich with promise and possibility, secure in the knowledge that every word had been meant, every promise kept, every dream made real through the power of a love that had only grown stronger with each passing year. A love that would sustain them through whatever the future might hold, as sure and constant as the stars above their home by Cedar Creek, as endless as the Wyoming sky, as true as the words that had started it all. "I meant every word."